name is Blake Hall. I'm the co-founder and CEO of IDMe, and I appreciate you all coming here for the session today. We're going to go over activating a community of loyal brand evangelists, and really there's two purposes for the session. One, if you're a publisher, it's to shine a little bit more light on what some of the brands are doing out there around activating communities. And then if you're a merchant looking for acquisition, retention strategies, this session will be useful for that as well. So just a quick overview. I'll go into my background for a moment, but IDMe is a digital identity company. We are the only accredited company right now in the United States that was selected by the federal government to provide a single sign-on for American citizens for high-risk transactions. The only other one was Verizon. They recently lost their accreditation. And then in the retail sector, we provide programs for 300 brands: Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball, the NFL, Under Armour, Overstock, where we help them reach communities that are important to their brand. So that's just kind of overarching context. We were a Wall Street Journal finalist for Startup of the Year in 2013. The United States Department of Commerce picked us as one of the top 5 identity companies in the country in 2013, and we're now powering an important part of the president's cybersecurity initiative for trusted identities for things like renewing your passport online or accessing your tax transcript. So a little bit about what the company does, a long way from sleeping on my buddy's couch back in 2010 to where we're at right now. So my background, I was an Army Ranger. I led a high-value target platoon in Iraq for 15 months, hunting folks all the way from some of the Al-Qaeda vehicle bomb networks up north to some of the Iranian militias that were running around. Had a wonderful group of guys. Went from that to Harvard Business School in the period of a few months, and it was actually at HBS where I started the company back in 2009. So just, by my background, I was an econ undergrad at Vanderbilt University, did my MBA at Harvard, briefly did a stint at McKinsey, realized that I did not want to do management consulting with the rest of my life. I'd rather show up in shorts and flip-flops and do something meaningful that can make a difference in people's lives. And so put on my startup hat. And then, was fortunate enough to be recognized by a few different publications for some of the work that we've done as a company in the identity space. I met the president while I looked like an Easter egg. I got about an hour's heads up that President Obama was coming by to visit us. I looked down and I said, oh shoot, this is gonna happen. So, pink shirt, white shorts, tennis shoes, and had a good conversation with the president about what we were doing. And then a few weeks after that, we did a special ticketing program for Kiss and Def Leppard. So I guess the takeaway from that is I have a pretty weird life, but it's awesome, where you get to go from the president to Gene Simmons in a couple weeks. And then I threw out the first pitch at a Nats game in American flag pants. So I guess entrepreneurship has some weird perks that comes along with it sometimes. To go into the actual session, so I just want to go over the concept of price discrimination first to understand why it's important to treat communities of consumers differently, right? And so there's a few different types of price discrimination. First degree is the seller, charging a different price to every single buyer. And a good example of that might be if you and I were to go to a bazaar in Thailand. We would be charged a different price from a local, right? That person would size you up. They would know that your willingness to pay is a lot higher than the local, and we get a different price point, right? So it's the same basic concept that is true from the times of the Silk Trail, where merchants will try to get as much data as they can on your willingness to pay and your price sensitivity, and then they want to maximize the amount that you're going to pay for those products. And we'll talk a little bit more about what certain brands are doing in terms of first-degree price discrimination. The takeaway, though, is you need a lot of data to do that very well. Second-degree price discrimination is pretty familiar to all of us. You charge a lower price point as the volume increases. You're trading off margin for quantity. And then third-degree price discrimination is the one that we'll focus on a little bit more in depth, which is when the seller is charging different price points to different communities and different demographic groups. And the reason you do that is you're using the community as a heuristic for a demand curve that's different from the general population, right? So the most simple one to illustrate that is students don't have a lot of money, right? So they are much more price sensitive to the average consumer than the average consumer. So you can actually increase your profits by charging a lower price point to that particular community, provided that price point isn't able to leak to folks who are not students and would take advantage of the program, right? So quick overview of price discrimination. Examples of how it makes businesses and society more efficient, right? We're all familiar with universities where, if you're financially well off, you pay full freight. If you don't have as much income and wealth, then you don't pay as much, and that actually increases access for lower income students who are going to college, right? So it's a good thing for everybody. The university makes more profit, more people get to go to school. Matinees, large families are trying to entice them to go out, so they're going to offer more budget-friendly kind of packages. And again, these are all, examples of ways that retailers are increasing profits by targeting folks. So some of the challenges, the first one talked about a little bit, sellers got to figure out what each customer is willing to pay, right? And so when you're in a barter economy, that's very easy. The merchant can size you up, but it's also very time intensive, right? You need that personal interaction, and that merchant has to have the power to alter their prices on the fly. After the Industrial Revolution, we had kind of a single price point for the mass market, and now with data, things are starting to move back in the other direction, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other things that will keep a merchant from changing price points is that they have competition now. So as people can do a Google search and quickly realize what other merchants are paying, even if you knew that a merchant, or a consumer was willing to pay more, if your competitors would undercut you, you're still not going to be able to charge that higher price point. In fact, you could lose business. You have to prevent consumers who are receiving a lower price point from reselling their product. And then you have to avoid the perception that the program is somehow unfair, right? And so some examples of that are when Coke was trying to charge higher prices to folks when it was hot outside. A lot of consumers felt that that was fundamentally unfair. And some of the same dynamics apply to community-based programs where you have to be wary of the perception of favoring one community over the other if people would feel that that's somehow favoring another group over themselves and they don't think that that's okay. So this is actually a chart from Amazon.com. So Amazon is changing their price points all the time, trying to figure out what the optimal price point is for a particular good. And so this actually just shows, you can see there in, looks like August or September, there's a price point that ranged all the way from $14 to $10 where they were experimenting in real time to figure out what consumers' willingness to pay was, right? Amazon can do that very effectively because they interact with customers so often, they have a lot of data. But that type of price discrimination is typically not accessible to smaller brands. If you only interact with a consumer once or twice over the course of a year, you're not going to be able to build up that kind of a profile to know what their demand curve is. And here's a few other examples of large brands that have frequent interactions that do the same thing on price discrimination. So for cheap tickets in Orbitz, logged-in users are seeing lower price points compared to shoppers who are not registered. Home Depot is actually displaying higher price points to shoppers that were using mobile devices versus those who are coming in on desktop browsers. Expedia and Hotels.com randomly displayed higher price points, and they were just trying to see if they were actually charging the most profitable price point. So, and Staples does it based on IP and geography. So they'll actually charge different price points based on whether or not the IP is coming in from New York City or the Midwest. And obviously, if it's New York, you're going to see a higher price point. And the takeaway here is that basically these brands are price discriminating because it's very profitable for them to hyper-segment the market and to figure out willingness to pay. So if you go down to why are communities important? Why is it important to activate large brands of consumer or large groups of consumers? And it really goes back to that initial concept of price discrimination. When you really break down loyalty marketing and lifetime value of a consumer, there's two questions. The first one is, how do I get my existing customers to spend more money with my brand and to favor my brand over others? And the second question is, how do I get my existing customers to talk about my brand in a positive way so that they're referring new customers to me as well, right? And that's what it comes down to. You could have a customer who shops with you all the time, but if they never talk to their friends, they might not be as valuable as somebody who shops with you infrequently, but then is a very passionate advocate for your brand because they're driving new customers to you. And so if you really want to optimize for true customer lifetime value, you want to both optimize for that individual consumer, and then you want to develop a positive emotional relationship with that customer. So how do you get that customer to talk about your brand in a favorable light at scale? And that's where communities become really, really important. By definition, they have very tightly knit social networks, and if you're able to establish a meaningful relationship with the consumer based on their relationship with that community, you have the potential to activate a large group of consumers for your brand. So the psychology behind this is a concept called homophily, and it's really at the end of the day the tendency of people to like people like themselves, right? So we tend to like people with the same value structures that we do. We tend to like people that have the same opinions about things that we do. And it's very important for brands to kind of realize that that's how human beings are engaging with one another. And if they want to be a part of that conversation, that becomes a really important concept to remember. So when you're thinking about which communities are relevant to your brand, it becomes really important to understand who your audience is today and who your most profitable customer segments are, right? So this is kind of a chart that's made famous. The airlines do this very, very well, right? They segment their most elite and loyal customers into the platinum status. They've got kind of their very frequent travelers in gold, and then the iron and lead segments are their less profitable customer segments who are more price sensitive. And what they're trying to do is they're always looking for folks in those bottom two tiers who have the potential to be moved up into the top as far as their most profitable customer segments. So they have a lot of data, and they can start to figure out, am I resonating with a particular community? And two specific brands, one that we work with in Under Armour, they realized that the military and first responders were highly correlated with very profitable customer segments. They both have very active lifestyles. They buy, a lot of their products for athletic pursuits. And so they decided that they wanted to establish a meaningful relationship with those two communities because they aligned very nicely with Under Armour's audience and with their brand values. But you'll also see other brands, that go in a completely different direction. J. Crew is probably a very well-known one that has a 15% off discount for students and teachers every day. They looked at their audience and realized that education was a very important market for them to own as a brand. And so they made a deliberate effort to reach out to that community with an evergreen discount that speaks to them. So at the end of the day, it's really up to the brand to figure out what are the aligned communities that line up with my profitable customer segments. And then once I've identified those aligned communities, how do I build a really positive relationship where I can give them an offer that's profitable and activate a conversation that increases revenue for my brand? So here's the big problem, right? So when you talk about e-commerce, the problem is that physical ID cards are not portable to digital sites, right? You can't take your driver's license and efficiently prove your identity online, nor can you take an AARP card or a student ID or a military ID and move it online. And that's really one of the problems that we saw back in 2010 that we solved for by connecting to authoritative databases, and is a reason why these large brands are deploying us. Because if you're not able to protect the price point to a given community, then you're not able to deliver the program online. So we saw brands like everyone from Major League Baseball to Caesars Entertainment to Busch Gardens to Cedar Fair and on, had different community-based programs, but they were confined to their brick and mortar channels where they could check a physical ID card. And what we consistently heard when we were talking with these brands was that unless we have a way to audit a consumer and know that they're in fact a student or know that they're a teacher or so forth, we have no way to protect ourselves. So this chart kind of sums up the problems with digital identity and some of the things that we're doing to help fix this ecosystem. Your most portable logins there on the left are not trusted. And because they're not trusted, you can't generally use them for transactions where your identity is actually in play, right? You can use them to quickly establish an account. The merchant might get some data about your brand affinities and the things that you like. And then but you can't use it for a transaction based on identity. And at the other end of the spectrum, your most trusted logins are probably with your financial institution, but they're not portable, right? So it becomes very difficult to prove your identity because there's this huge void where Facebook can't help you prove that you're a student, and a bank, is not going to allow someone else to prove your identity at a different website. So that's the problem that basically we stepped in to fill with different partners. We have real-time access to 21.4 million college and graduate enrollment records, federal databases on military service records, state licensing databases for teachers and so forth. And then we work with brands who want to reach a particular community. And the approach is sort of like PayPal, but for identity, where you can attach an affiliation like your student status to an email and password. And then that email and password becomes portable to all the different sites that leverage our technology. So we have about 4,500 to 5,000 users signing up for our service per day. We're on a trajectory to hit over 10,000 by the end of this year. And just for context, we were around 1,000 per day last fall. So we're growing at a really rapid clip. And that's one of the reasons why the government selected us for the programs that they did, is that we were the first network that gives users control over their personal data and increases trust for merchants that they saw that actually got adoption and wasn't a white paper. And we are very fortunate to have some big clients that are working with us as well. So at the end of the day, we envision a future where different community members can have IDs within a wallet that are just as portable as they are in the physical world, where you could go to a website and prove that you're an AARP member or a USA member at login. And if that brand had a marketing relationship with them, the end user could quickly and efficiently prove their status by logging in. What's pretty neat is after you click that button, you can actually tie that to your Facebook or your Twitter account. So your Facebook, even though Facebook's not directly aware of those associations, we as a network are. You essentially could log in with Facebook across our platform and prove that you're an AARP member. This is just a few of the things that we did in the federal space. We were selected for the National Strategy for Trust Identities in Cyberspace and for Connect.gov. And we're doing the first digital driver's license with the state of Virginia. And all this is designed it's less so about promoting ID.me than it is really about giving users choice. So we're working with a lot of different identity providers that are out there in the market, different banks, different membership groups. And we just want to make their logins portable across our network so that consumers can use them on different websites without having to establish a new account. Just quick overview on some of the communities that we see that are in demand more often. Military tends to be probably the most desired group that we work with across most of the different merchants. There's 21.3 million veterans in the country. You've got about 2.7 million active duty. So just for folks who've worn the uniform, you're looking at about 25 million Americans. And we've had some really promising results from case studies that I'll go through in a moment. Students, you've got around 17.5 to 18 million undergrad, and then another 3 to 4 million graduate students in the country. And then first responders and teachers are a little bit smaller. I mean, you're just looking at a couple million per, but by far, military and students tend to be the ones that most brands start with. But then we've seen trade associations become popular as well. So Overstock started with military with us. They expanded to students, teachers, first responders, and now they want interior decorators and designers as soon as that becomes available, because that segment is very profitable for them and is an influential part of their market. This is a pretty neat program that we're doing for SeaWorld and for Busch Gardens. They're giving away complimentary admission to members of different groups. And so just by using that single sign-on and proving their affiliation, they get access to that benefit from that park. This is actually, this is pretty neat. So this is the booking flow for totalrewards.com for Caesars Entertainment. So if you go to totalrewards.com, you can look down there, and Caesars decided that for military students, teachers, and first responders, they were going to do an evergreen offer. This program is converting at over 12% on the affiliate side. It's a really, really strong start to the program, and they've been passionate about talking to some of the other folks that have moved over to some of the different hotel chains from Caesars. But we have really strong data that shows that when you target a community and build a relationship with them, it can be very, very profitable. And that's just another shot of the Caesars integration. This is an example of Under Armour. So this integration is the same. It's on NFL Shop, NHL Shop, the NBA Store, Fanatics, Fans Edge, are just a few examples of brands that have this type of integration where the consumer actually goes through, and where the promo code functionality lives, instead of having to actually put in a promo code, what they do is they just prove that they're a member of the community that's being targeted, and they consent to the release of their information to that brand, so it all happens in a very transparent way to the end user. And when that happens, a hidden promo code that nobody ever sees is activated for that end user that applies the group discount to their cart. So those promo codes can't be leaked and they can't be shared. And why that's really exciting for different affiliate publishers is that our technology doesn't reset affiliate links or do any of that stuff. So if it's Retail Me Not, if it's a blogger, if it's shop.com, whoever's driving that traffic, they now become a targeted referral source for students or for teachers or for military. So if you've got an audience on the content side that's aligned with some of these community offers, you can get pretty high conversion rates by figuring out what brands are starting to offer these programs online, and if it aligns with a community that you've built. From the results that we're seeing, I would encourage you to experiment with it and then judge it by its merits. So that's exactly an example of what Under Armour did. So Under Armour, during their first year, they increased their entire affiliate program revenue by 30%. They had 70% new customers to file. The demographics of those 70% were, from what I heard informally, almost completely different from their typical demographics that were coming in through their online channel. And they were aggressively promoting the military and first responder offer that they have in their checkout cart across Retail Me Not, across Savings.com, and across Ebates. And we even saw earned media sites like military.com and Stars and Stripes and a whole bunch of community-based publications began to pick up the offer and to promote it as well. So the brand got a lot of uptake from that as well. And then, of course, military spouse bloggers are a very active community. They began to write about it as well. And so the end result was higher conversion rates for those bloggers who now had a special offer to talk to with their readership, and for the brand, 30% growth year over year is pretty phenomenal. And that's just an example of Retail Me Not promoting one of the community-based offers on their site. So now we just launched the program with a top 250 internet retailer to keep things anonymous right now until we get approval to share who they are. But the stats from that, we had 45% customers new to file. 60% of them hadn't made a purchase in over a year of the folks who were not new to file. 30% increase in average order value, and they had over $700,000 generated through the program in the first 60 days. Overstock, similar deal. They started with military. They saw that veterans were twice as profitable as a typical Overstock customer. That meant higher commissions for their affiliates, of course. And Patrick Byrne, the CEO, asked me to fly out to talk to him about why that was the case. And we literally walked through a lot of the same things, here about price discrimination, about how it's just more powerful to build an emotional connection with folks where you recognize an important part of their identity and to become part of that conversation within the community that's out there. And then, for Major League Baseball, very fortunate to power the subscription service for MLB TV for students and for military, and that program has been very successful as well. 11% average click-to-purchase rate. This is just a little bit more about the Kiss and Def Leppard, and it just goes through the process, which is pretty intuitive. And that just shows an example of some of the earned media that was picked up following the launch of that program, where different trade pubs and community-based sites that were focused on that group carried the offer. This is just an example of the MLB TV integration for college students. So if you go to MLB TV, that's kind of front and center. Major League Baseball did a lot of research that showed that the earlier you go to a ballpark, it's directly correlated with your profitability over your lifetime. So the earlier you go, the more likely you are to not only become a loyal fan, but to take your kids. And so the commissioner made it a big part of MLB's strategy to get college students out to ballparks, as aggressively as they could. We've seen, so for some of the kind of coupon type of offer lists, that if you just have a group targeted subject line, and if you're able to use that in your CRM tool, you have really strong lift, right? So you'll have, up to 33% lift on an ongoing basis, and this is for a list that, goes out at least 2 times per week, so pretty high frequency, and seeing very high engagement relative to some of the industry lists that are out there. And then for certain holidays like Veterans Day for military, but then you also have like back to school shopping for students and teachers. We know that some of the brands that have been working with us for over 2 years, as they've built up a substantial base of users within that group, when they've targeted them around holidays, they've broken internal records for the company for open rate, for click-through, and for conversion. And again, it's because they're engaging that group of customers in a very targeted way, in a way that speaks to that emotional connection with the group, and they're hitting them with an offer that is specially designed for them, and it's just proven to be a very effective program. And this is something that Tickets.com is working with us on right now on the ticketing side. It's a direct integration into the different process flows where their folks who are on that platform can target different communities that are aligned with their brand, and then our technology just gates it for the different affiliate publishers that would drive the traffic that way. So with that, I think we just have a couple of minutes left, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has for me. Go ahead.
Are you US only?
We are. So the question is, are we US only? And we are.
Are you planning on expanding at all?
We do plan on expanding. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've there's so much ground to cover, to be honest, just onboarding all the different membership groups here domestically, but we've architected our platform really to be modular. So once we make it self-serve completely, we anticipate rolling out to different countries. Yep.
So the groups that you're talking about have real quantifiable organizations behind them. What are you guys doing for groups? Like we work with makeup artists.
Mm-hmm.
And for interior designers, there's no standardized licensing for interior designers. So how do you just work with a professional organization?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question is, what do we do for other groups that are smaller or maybe don't have a formal body representing them? So I think, for our purposes, we almost have to work with a formal body of some sort, whether it's the professional certification entity or the group. If it's a larger membership group like the PTA or AAA or something like that, our advantage is that as we're getting more and more retailers on board, the incentive for them to integrate with us becomes a lot more powerful. I think for like longer tail things where it could be like, this is my local community group or this is my chapter of the PTA, we are considering doing something that integrates with like Meetup and with Facebook, but we would just have to tell merchants there's not as much trust around those types of circles. That would be much more like a community-based decision.
What about technologies that are using two different networks to like cross-check each other, like the Weed or what's it called? PT Lux, I think it's called.
Yeah.
That basically uses your LinkedIn plus your Facebook to sort of cross-reference whether or not you're trustworthy.
Yep. So the question is, can you cross-reference from different data sources in order to piece together, an accurate response? And I would say most of the time we're really after a deterministic yes or no. So when you think about a group like USAA, they are the authoritative source for whether someone is or is not a USAA member. And then we want that end user, if they come in and they say, hey, this is my information, I am X, we just then verify that against the authoritative source and say, does this match a member? And then that becomes really important because it's not only important to get that 100% yes or no. You want to be able to prevent duplication so that one person can't create 10 different membership IDs for that group. And then you also want to be able to monitor it over time. So if somebody graduates from school, you need to be able to know that unique student actually graduated and to revoke their student status within it, and that becomes really complicated. So instead of the data broker method where folks are guessing about who consumers are, we're actually doing direct integrations into the groups and then making everything transparent so that the consumer controls it. Yeah, thank you.